So another follow-on question I like to ask to candidates is asking them, what is variable hoisting? So to describe variable hoisting, I'm going to show you an example. So let me paste some code here. So we're using useStrict. So because we're using useStrict, it means that a variable has to be declared before it is used. So I would actually expect this code to fail because I am trying to use the variable a before it's actually declared, and it's declared on the line below. So I would actually expect this code to fail. But if I save and refresh, you can see there's no error being printed out in the console underneath. There's just the undefined string is getting printed out. And when I actually see which line's printing that out, you can see it is in fact that console log A. So console log A is actually printing out the value undefined. Now, if you didn't understand variable hoisting, that would actually be a bit confusing. But to understand what's going on here, we've got to understand what JavaScript is doing under the hood. So when JavaScript sees some code like var a is equal to 1, it actually splits that out into two lines. The first part being the declaration, so var a, and it would actually stick that as high as it can on the page. So if it's on the file scope, it will put it at the top of the page. Or if it's in the function scope, it will try and put it at the top of the function. And then it splits it out, and then it just puts a is equal to 1. So that's, let me delete this thing here. So that's really what's going on here, is it split out var a is equal to 1 to var a at the top of the file, and then a is equal to 1 at the bottom of the file. So when we do console log a, var a has already been declared. And because a declared variable which hasn't been initialized automatically has the value of undefined, that's what we're printing out. That's what console log a prints out. So that's what variable hoisting is in JavaScript. It's automatic hoisting of the variable declaration to the top of its enclosing scope. Because we're in global scope here, the top of the scope is the top of the file. But if we were inside a function, so for instance, if this was inside a function, let's call it foo, we would still have the same behavior. So if I did console log a and then var a is equal to 1, same thing's going to happen here. It's going to print out undefined. Let me scroll up. Oh, we've got a call foo as well. So it again prints out undefined because inside a function, it still performs the hoisting. But inside a function, it'll only push the variable declaration the top of the function scope, so the top of the actual function itself there. It won't push it to global scope, it will just push it to the top of the function. And so that's really what's going on. That is variable hoisting. But as well as hoisting variables, it will also hoist functions themselves. So let me give you another example. So how about this? Okay, this looks a bit strange. So what's going on here? So I'm calling the function foo, but I'm calling it before I've even declared or defined what foo is. Foo is actually declared underneath that statement. So what would you expect to happen here? Well, again, we're just printing out console log a. JavaScript is able to call the function foo before it's even seen the function foo. And that's because, again, JavaScript performs hoisting on functions. So when it sees this code here, it will take any function declaration and move it up to the highest part of the scope that it can find. So it's moving it up in here because we're in global scope and file scope. It's going to move up to the top of the page. But again, if function foo was being called inside function moo, it would move the function foo up to the top of the moo function, to the top of the scope in which it's declared in. So that's how JavaScript hoists functions. Let's give another example here. So what happens if instead of this just declaring a function foo, we declare a variable foo to be equal to an anonymous function? So sometimes that's what people do. We declare variables as functions. What's going to happen here? Let me refresh. Now it says type error foo is not a function. So we might be a bit confused here because we think that actually with hoisting, this should be moved to the top of the script and then we would get undefined printed as before. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is the same thing that happens when we perform variable hoisting. So what's going on is it's putting var at the top of the scope there, variable declaration at the top, and then we're just assigning the anonymous function to the variable foo. But at this point, when we're calling foo, foo is equal to undefined, and you can't call undefined. So that's really what's going on, and that's why we're throwing an error at the bottom. And that's one of the reasons that it's important to understand hoisting in general in JavaScript. Functions and variables are hoisted to the top of the page, but if you have a variable that's equal to a function, to an anonymous function, you may be caught out with some of these issues, like the one I've just shown you right now.